By 44 BCE, Julius Caesar had conquered every rival in his path. He distributed land to the poor, filled the Senate with his loyalists, and claimed the title of dictator for life. To the conservative Roman elite, he was acting like a king, directly threatening 4.5 centuries of republican tradition. A group of roughly 60 senators saw him as a direct threat to the state. For months, these self-styled liberators met in secret to debate how to remove him. They toyed with complex, slow-moving ideas, pushing him off a bridge during a crowded election, or hiding assassins in plain sight as gladiators at the public games. But then, Caesar made an unexpected public announcement. In a matter of days, on March 18th, he was leaving Rome to launch a massive multi-year military campaign against the Parthian Empire. This single announcement threw the conspirators into a panic. They had been operating under the assumption that they had months to perfect a plan. Now, their window had shrunk to a mere 72 hours. They threw out all their old plans and started from scratch. The assassination needed to happen in a controlled environment, away from his personal bodyguards. They agreed their only remaining shot was the very last Senate meeting before his departure, March 15th, the Ides of March. As they rushed to finalize the logistics, the experienced military general Cassius pointed out a massive flaw. Caesar's co-consul was Mark Antony. He was fiercely loyal, physically imposing, and he would be sitting only a few paces away. Cassius argued that for the conspiracy to survive, Antony had to die too, but Marcus Brutus strongly disagreed. He argued that they were not staging a violent coup, they were principled men surgically removing a tyrant. If they committed a double murder, they would look like butchers, and the Roman public would turn on them. Brutus won the argument. Antony would be spared. It was a moral victory for the conspirators, but they were choosing to leave Caesar's most loyal and capable general alive and unhindered on the very day of the attack. The morning of March 15th began with screaming. Hours before dawn, Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, awoke from a terrifying nightmare where their house collapsed, leaving her covered in blood and holding Caesar's mangled corpse. Priests performing morning sacrifices also reported disturbing omens. Shaken by his wife's dream and the religious warnings, Caesar sent word to cancel the Senate meeting. For several hours, the dictator stayed home. When the conspirators heard the news, their plot was on the verge of total collapse. If Caesar stayed inside today, they would lose their opportunity entirely. They dispatched Decimus, a trusted member of Caesar's inner circle and a secret assassin, to salvage the plan. Decimus arrived at Caesar's house and immediately went to work on his ego. He laughed at the omens, telling Caesar that if he canceled a session because of a woman's bad dreams, the Senate would take it as a deliberate insult. Then he dangled a lie. The Senate was supposedly waiting to officially grant Caesar the title of king outside of Italy. The flattery worked. Caesar changed his mind and agreed to go. The conspirators didn't need to drag him out of his fortified home. They simply used his own hubris and ambition to lure him into the trap. As Caesar walked through the streets of Rome, a man pushed through the gathered crowds and shoved a scroll into his hand. It contained detailed, specific information about the entire assassination plot. But Caesar, constantly handed petitions by citizens, passed it off to an attendant without reading a single word. Because the usual Senate house was under renovation, the meeting was being held at the Theater of Pompey. This was an enclosed, isolated temple complex located outside the city's standard political center, meaning Caesar's usual bodyguards had to wait outside. Inside, the conspirators had smuggled daggers into the chamber, using wooden baskets meant for note-taking materials. And as Caesar arrived, one of the senators intentionally pulled Mark Antony aside, distracting him in the exterior portico so Caesar would enter the room completely alone. Caesar took his seat on a golden chair at the front of the room. A senator approached with a petition to pardon his exiled brother. On cue, dozens of other conspirators rose from their benches and crowded in close, pretending to support the request. In reality, they were forming a physical wall around Caesar, so he had no route of escape. The senator grabbed Caesar's toga and violently yanked it down from his shoulder. This was the signal, but the attack began as a panicked, disorganized frenzy. The first blade grazed Caesar's neck, and he immediately fought back. This diagram outlines the reality of the attack. There were roughly 60 conspirators in the room, but when the moment came to strike, nearly 90% of them froze. According to ancient medical reports, Caesar suffered only 23 total stab wounds. Further analysis suggests that only 5 of those wounds were inflicted while Caesar was actively fighting for his life. The assassins were so frantic that they wildly stabbed at each other in the crossfire, hitting their own allies before a single fatal strike finally pierced Caesar's ribs. A moment of wonder. Caesar violently grappled with his attackers until he looked up and saw his trusted friend Brutus standing among them with a drawn dagger. At that moment, Caesar stopped fighting. He pulled his toga over his face to preserve his dignity and collapsed to the floor. By sheer coincidence, he fell directly at the base of a statue of Pompey the Great. The man who had defeated Pompey in a brutal civil war to claim absolute power now bled to death, staring up at his old rival. The melee lasted barely a minute. Brutus, his hands dripping with blood, turned to the remaining senators, expecting to be met with cheers of liberation. Instead, the room fell into a terrified, dead silence. The non-conspiring senators scrambled for the exits and fled for their lives. The assassins had made a catastrophic miscalculation. Because they spent their time in an elite echo chamber of conservative aristocrats, they completely misunderstood the Roman public. The citizens didn't see Caesar as a tyrant. They loved him for his land distribution and populous reforms. That decision to spare Mark Antony proved fatal. Antony immediately stepped into the chaos, and days later he delivered a masterful, passionate speech at Caesar's public funeral. He used the bloody toga and Caesar's will to whip the citizens into a vengeful frenzy, forcing the conspirators to flee the city. A massive power vacuum opened up, swallowing Rome in yet another brutal civil war. Caesar's adopted heir, Augustus, allied with Antony to hunt down every last one of the assassins until Brutus and Cassius were dead. Brutus was so convinced of his own righteousness that he minted coins celebrating the assassination, stamped with the date Ide Mar and the very daggers used in the attack. He never realized he had catalyzed the exact thing he was trying to prevent. The rushed 72-hour panic of the Ides of March stands as one of history's great unintended consequences. A conspiracy designed solely to stop a dictatorship and save the Roman Republic ended up destroying it completely,